Oh man, look at this. We got a logo, we've got a name, and we've got a host who's figuring out a little bit how to use OBS to record videos better so that it's not a choppy mess. So I apologize for the quality of the first two, and hopefully we're better from here. So this is Chris from 1600 Dust. I'm going to call this project Zero Dust. So, what are we doing? Where are we at? Where do we leave off? Let's go ahead and do a quick kind of get our bearings, see where we are. We've got 0 gold, and that's because we used that 100 gold we got for playing a ranked match to get another pack. So we're sitting with our pack. We're sitting with our collection, our meager collection like we saw last episode. 20 packs is not necessarily enough to really get us anywhere, so we need to be creative. How are we going to be creative? First of all, I did some thinking. I mentioned I had those cards in Wild, and, hey, it's a nice way to dust for some extra dust. But what I've decided is that I'm going to just leave those sit there. If you're starting this out new, like kind of the experiment is hypothesizing, you're not going to have access to those wild cards anyway. So I want to put myself on equal footing as to with what you're dealing with, which means I'm not going to dust them. They're just going to sit there. Additionally, we do have some basics, very simple. And like I mentioned last time, the one that we've got all the basics unlocked for are Mage. So what we need to do is have a discussion about how are we going to be even a little bit competitive here. And I think a good place to start with that is going to be to talk about legendaries. Obviously, if you search for legendary, it's going to show the ones that we do have. We've got Gromash from the welcome pack. We've got Marin the Fox from a special event. So I'm not going to use him either, and I can't dust him anyway. And we've got Karen that we pulled from our initial packs. Now, obviously, there are a ton more legendaries that are out there. Do you need to craft all of them? No. Do you need to craft most of them? No. But what we need to do is kind of come up with a good baseline for cards that we need. So the focus of this episode is going to be legendaries and what are the ones that are worth grabbing. So we're going to do a quick run through here, and we're going to do a just kind of a quick once over about why they're important and what they can be used in, what decks they're in, things of that nature. These are also legendaries where if I pull them from a pack, I'm not going to dust them. There are certainly some legendaries that you're going to have a hard decision with yourself. For instance, Hogger would be a good one that comes to mind. Legendaries, he has a cool effect. However, he doesn't see a lot of play right now, so I would probably, if I pulled him, I would think long and hard about maybe dusting him for other resources. Maybe I need an epic. Maybe I need 1 or 2 cards that I'm missing to finish a deck. And that deck will see play, whereas a deck with Hogger may not see play. Additionally, there's cards like Cairn. I'm not going to dust him because I think he's a pretty useful card, and we could always run the route of maybe trying to build a deck around him. But when dust is at a premium, we need to kind of have some decisions here. So let's just go through the list of what I feel are beneficial legendaries to craft, or to keep if you pull them. And right off the bat is Blood Mage Thalanos. Now, doesn't seem like a lot, especially if you're new, but the ability to do spell damage and get a card draw when he dies is extremely relevant. This isn't a card that you drop down on turn 2. This is usually a card that you drop down and then you play a follow-up spell with it that does additional damage, maybe even for lethal. Not very high on my initial priority list of a card to craft, but if we do pull him from a pack, there's no way I'm dusting him. He's too useful. Prince Keleseth is pretty powerful in a lot of aggressive decks. If your deck has no 2-cost cards, give all minions in your deck +1/+1. Ergo, he's the only 2-cost card in your deck. If I pull him, I am certainly going to hold on to him. I'm not going to craft him initially. 1, we don't have the dust, and 2, I've been looking at how do I create a viable deck? And the best way to create a viable deck is to find one that does not have a lot of legendaries. It, tends to be pretty aggressive usually. And I'm kind of leaning toward probably Odd Rogue or Odd Paladin right now, based off of the collection I do have and what I would need to do to get a deck up and running. But that's going to be a topic for the next show. Next we have King Mukla. He pops up in Odd Rogue from time to time, but I don't think he's a necessary inclusion to Odd Rogue. I've played Odd Rogue a lot of times without him. Is he overpowered? Yes, and he would make the deck better, but the deck is not non-functioning without him, so he can kind of sit by the wayside. Then we have Zola the Gorgon, who shows up in Shudderwock Shaman. Shudderwock Shaman is an extremely expensive deck, especially when you're starting out, so worthwhile, you will see it, but that is what it is. Harrison Jones. Premium weapon removal. Battlecry, destroy your opponent's weapon, and draw cards equal to its durability. We can fudge this one a little bit. You could always run an Acidic Swamp Ooze or the ooze that gives you armor, whose name is escaping me right now, even and odd respectively. But, you know, he's certainly worth your time if you do happen to have him. Leroy Jenkins faces the place, and as far as I'm concerned, he is a must craft, especially because we're tending to lean aggro with our very minimal collection. With that in mind, it's definitely worth trying to find some classic packs to crack him, but he's high on my list. Now, especially with Odd, there was always a contention, you know, when Odd and Even wasn't into it. It's like, well, if you don't have Leroy, you can just run one copy of Reckless Rocketeer. However, Reckless Rocketeer costs 6, so that's kind of not really in the cards for us. So he's certainly pretty high up there on the legendaries that I want to get as soon as possible. Again, Greymane is the Even deck enabler. Even decks, just from my experience, tend to be a bit more expensive to craft than Odd, so while he is important, he's kind of low on our priority list. The Black Knight is premium taunt removal. We can kind of get around this with things like Spellbreaker and Hoot Hoot, the Ironbeak Owl. Baron Geddon shows up in Control Mage. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all of their characters, and if you have the Frostless Jaina hero power active, he does lifesteal in addition to that, which is pretty oppressive. Much like Shudderwock Shaman, Control Mage is a very expensive deck to build, and we're not leaning that way at this time. The Lich King is Bay. Unfortunately, because he's even and we're leaning Odd right now, kind of means we wouldn't be using him anyway, but he is one of those cards that tends to make most decks more powerful because he's in it, so he's a very high priority legendary to have. Now we come up on the dragons. Alexstrasza again in Control Mage and some Dragon Priest builds. Set of heroes remaining health to 15. The initial thought is, sweet, I can burn my opponent down, but this also has a lot of play, maybe bringing you up to 15. You're usually not winning anyway in that situation, but it does work that way as well. Baku the Moon Eater is a beast, and this is our Odd deck enabler. This is number 1 craft for me as far as I'm concerned right now, because I need this to make any sort of Odd deck viable. Malygos is, you know, in and out of favor to varying degrees, never really goes away entirely. It seems like if you follow Hearthstone on social media, every once in a while people are like, oh, holy crap, I remembered Malygos was good, and Malygos is always good. Malygos has a huge butt, and spell damage +5 means even your rinky-dink little spells do massive damage. It's pretty typical to play this, and then, you know, your opponent's dead next turn if they don't have an answer. Ysera is a key dragon as well. Getting those dream cards is useful. And finally, Deathwing is usually best served as a free from amber target as opposed to hard casting it, but you can see dragons a lot of time. You'll see it, you know, in Priest, Warrior, it kind of comes in and out of fashion, and Mage sometimes. So Deathwing's one of those, you'll run into it every once in a while. I'd probably hold on to it if I pulled it from a pack. And as you can see, there were a lot of legendaries that we didn't cover, and those are ones that I feel like, you know, If I get a Tankmaster Overspark, I'm probably going to dust him because that dust could be better served towards something else. So those are the neutrals. Let's go ahead and start with Druid. Druid's got Malfurion the Pestilent, extremely powerful Death Knight. If you're leaning anything Druid, Malfurion the Pestilent is almost always an auto-include. Then the other big one that I saw is Hadronox, which is kind of the key linchpin card in Taunt Druid. Taunt Druid also tends to be a little bit more expensive to build, but Hadronox is a key card in that. You can't have a Taunt Druid without Hadronox. Moving on to Hunter, we have Deathstalker Rexxar, which kind of overcomes one of the huge issues that Hunter has, which is usually, card draw or being able to refill your hand again. Slamming Build-A-Beast gives you another creature that you can play either this turn or the next, depending on what you build. And it's I would say it's semi-random. You can kind of cater the beast that you build toward what your situation is telling you need, but it doesn't always work. Still, if you're running a Hunter build, Rexxar's in it. Roque-Delaars and Spell Hunter. If your deck has no minions, fill your hand with Hunter spells. Another way of getting around kind of the lack of card draw that Hunter seems to have. And you can fill it up with a lot of stuff. It can absolutely wreak havoc if you get a bunch of secrets. All of a sudden, your opponent doesn't really know what secrets you're playing. There's a lot of utility there. And again, certainly one I'm going to hold on to if I get it, because it's a build a deck. It's a build a deck around it type of legendary. We've got these three right here that kind of go hand in hand: Swamp King Dread, Kathrina Winterwisp, and King Crush, all in Beast Hunter. And the linchpin of this is Kathrina Winterwisp. Battlecry and Death Rattle recruit a beast, and ideally what you're wanting to recruit is one of these big guys to knock your opponent down really quick. But, again, we've talked a couple times about trying to find a deck that's cheaper. These three legendaries are all in the same deck, and you're looking at a lot of dust right there just to kind of get something started. So if I pull them, I'm holding on to them, but if I pull King Crush, I'm not going to dust everything else to get Kathrina and Swamp King Dread. I'm probably still going to just kind of move on with my original game plan. That does it for Hunter. For Mage, we've got Archmage Arugal. Whenever you draw a minion, add a copy of it to your hand. It's kind of fringe, shows up from time to time. Pyros, every once in a while, people try and make Elemental Mage a thing. Pyros is a pretty well-costed, recursive elemental card. And it's a pretty cool effect as well. It comes back as a 6/6, then it comes back as a 10/10. Just a pain in the butt to get rid of it. Alaneth is your turn 6 tempo mage, slam it as soon as you pull it type of card. If I ended up with this card, I would certainly look toward trying to build a tempo mage deck, because this is an extremely powerful card. Archmage Antonidas, aha. He's another build around in my opinion. I probably couldn't build a super tier 1 mega mage deck if he was the only legendary I had, but I would certainly see what I could make work with the spells that I had available to me, because he just creates so much damage over the course of time, and your opponent is going to expend resources to get rid of him. Dragoncaller Alana is another control mage card, and again, control mage is pretty expensive, so if we got it, that's a piece in play. I'm not going to dust it, but it's certainly not going to mean, now I got to dust everything I have to make control mage. And Frostlich Jaina, kind of your win condition with control mage. Your elementals have lifesteal, you keep making more of them, and it makes life very difficult for your opponent. Next we have Paladin. Sunkeeper Tarim, I would argue, is one of the best, if not the best legendary we have in Standard right now. It can, if you're ahead, you're just going to make it oppressive for your opponent to win. If you're behind, it can bring you to even, and if you're evenly matched, it can help you get ahead. This is a extremely valuable card. Unfortunately, it's even costed, and like I said, we're leaning odd, but I'm not going to dust him if he shows up in a pack. Velenir saw some play in Even Paladin. Even Paladin kind of fell by the wayside a little bit at the time of recording this, but Valinir's a extremely useful card, and we could consider trying to find ways to build around a card like that. And Tyrion Fordring is kind of like the classic Paladin card. If you get this card, you're happy. If you're an aggro opponent and you see this card come down, you're very sad. It not only has Divine Shield and Taunt, but you get a weapon when he gets removed from play. So extremely valuable card. Certainly one of those potential build around cards. For Priest, we have Lyra the Sunshard. Plop it down with some cheap Priest spells and hope to get other spells back that can be of use to you. Prophet Velen is a end game kind of card for control Priest decks. Doubles the damage and healing of your spells and hero power. Works really well in conjunction with Shadow Reaper Anduin, which deal 2 damage after you play a card. Refresh this. You can do some crazy shenanigans. And the battle cry, destroy all minions with 5 or more attack. It's worth mentioning that that's your minions as well, so be aware of that. A lot of times you're kind of playing bigger dudes when you're playing this thing, so make sure they don't go away as well. Rogue. Kingsbane is how to lose friends and irritate people. The problem with Kingsbane is it needs a lot of other cards to make a Kingsbane deck work well. And since we don't have any of those other cards, I'm not going to go out of my way to try and craft this one right away. The Caverns Below, if Kingsbane is the annoying cousin, then the Caverns Below is the aunt of that cousin who says, it's fine, just let him play with you. Quest Rogue, extremely viable on tournament if you watch any sort of tournament play on Twitch. Less prevalent on ladder. You see it from time to time. It's the card that no matter how many times they nerf it, it's still going to be viable for whatever reason. Edwin Van Cleef shows up in Miracle Rogue. It's just a good way to make a big dude that is difficult for your opponent to deal with. You tend to play a lot of combo cards, slam this guy down, and he can get huge really quick. Sonya Shadow Dancer is in Quest Rogue, so Quest Rogue and Kingsbane both require a lot of specific cards, so we're kind of not leaning that way, but I'm certainly holding on to her if I get her in a pack. And then Valera the Hollow, also in most Rogue builds to some degree, certainly in Quest, because you can create an additional copy of a card that you drew. Just kind of makes the quest bigger and better. But again, requires a lot of additional stuff to make it work. Shaman. Thrall Deathseer. Used to see a lot of play in the last standard meta because there were other cards that kind of played into his evolve ability. Not really seeing a whole lot of play right now, if any at all, but he's worth mentioning. Grumble World Shaker is in Shudderwock Shaman. Alakir the Windlord is just kind of a cool, there's some even Shaman going around, but Alakir is kind of like a pretty cool finishing move for Shaman to have, and it's a pretty, it's you slam it down and your opponent has to deal with it. Hagatha the Witch is also in Shudderwock Shaman, and then of course the card that gives it its name, Shudderwock Shaman. But again, we're talking lots and lots of very specific cards that need to go into this deck to make it work effectively. Kind of not the way we're leaning at this time. All right, we got Warlock. Skull of the Minari, it's in Cube Warlock. It sees some play, and people are experimenting with it in Zoo. Pulling a demon from your hand is pretty powerful. If we got this card, I would probably look at building some sort of demon Warlock build with just the demons I have on hand just to see what happens. That's how powerful of a card this is. It's certainly a build around. Rin the First Disciple kind of falls in and out of favor. It's a very powerful ability. Eventually those first seals go all the way up to the 5th seal, and then you get a 10/10 Azari the Destroyer that destroys your opponent's deck. It can be very slow, And because we don't have a lot of collection right now, our gut instinct is to try and go fast, which means that she's probably not super important to us at this point. Lord Godfrey's Defile on a body and sees some play in Cube Warlock. And Big Daddy Bloodreaver Gul'dan, summoning all friendly demons that died in this game and dealing 3 damage that heals you for 3 anywhere you want it. I would argue there are 3 Death Knights that if I got them, I'm building a deck around them at this juncture. That would be Bloodreaver Gul'dan. That would be Shadow Reaper Anduin, and probably Malfurion the Pestilent. If you have them, they're in a deck. Odds are good. They're in any deck of that class. Other ones kind of fall in and out. We didn't even discuss the Paladin one because that's an extremely fringe deck that you see him in. But if I have one of those 3 Death Knights, that kind of changes my game plan to go, I'm building a deck around these guys as best as I possibly can. Next up we have Warrior. Fireplume's Heart is Quest Warrior, which is a pretty powerful deck. Difficult and a little bit difficult to pilot. Not the most difficult deck to pilot, but a little bit. And again, the biggest problem is that you're going to be hurting for other cards to make it work effectively. Darius Crowley's in Rush Warrior. Geosculptor Yip is kind of a fringe goofball card. If I pulled it, I would probably build around it just for the fun of it. We've got Grommash. He's kind of a finisher. To be quite frank, not the best legendary to get from our beginner pack, but you play the hand you're dealt, pun intended. Rotface is Dead Man's Hand Warrior, or basically anything that has a lot of whirlwind effects, because some crazy stuff can just happen and frequently does. Scourgelord Garrosh is also in Taunt Warrior, and again, automatic whirlwind effect each turn if you want it. And that Shadowmourne that deals damages adjacent minions is just powerful. Extremely powerful card. And then Woe Cleaver shows up in Rush Warrior. And Rush Warrior itself is, again, kind of a fringe deck. So that's it. That's the legendaries. Now, like I said, there's a lot we didn't cover. I just kind of briefly went through the ones that I felt like were the most important. If I pull them in a pack, I'm not going to dust them. If I pull a Lower Walker Cho and I'm needing a specific epic or a couple of rares to finish off a deck, I'm going to seriously consider dusting Lower Walker Cho. No offense to the Panda. So, where do we go from here? I think the next step is we need to decide what deck we're going to build. Now, like I mentioned, I'm looking for cheap and aggressive, and that led me down the path of either Odd Paladin or Odd Rogue. Which means, and if you're playing along at home along with me, and the next step is going to be to take Rogue and Paladin to level 10, which means I unlock all of the basic cards. So as you can see, I've got just the basic 10 on Paladin, the basic 10 on Rogue. Right, I understand that. I'm just... So, that's what we're going to do. So the next time that I record a video, I'll have both of these up to 20 out of 20, and maybe we'll get some additional packs from that because of it. Maybe, maybe not. But we'll go from there. If you're following along and you're looking for kind of what should I do while I'm making the next episode, I'd say go ahead and try and take all of these up to 20, or at least the ones that you can. If you're looking for cheap and effective and want to follow along with me as closely as possible, focus on getting your Paladin and your Rogue up to 20 out of 20 basic cards, and then we'll start trying to build a deck. And that's gonna do it for this episode. So you can go to 1600dust.com, and you can find us on Twitter at 1600dust, and I'm on Twitter at cmplumber. Thanks for watching, and I will see all of you next time. Bye.